So today I'm going to be talking about AMP governance and the proposal that we recently published. I am Joey Rozier. I'm an engineering manager here at Google. If you want to reach me, you can reach me on Slack and GitHub at Mr. Joro. I spent a lot of time thinking about how the AMP community operates and things like that. And so the governance is sort of a natural next step for thinking about how the community operates. So you probably saw in the news that we recently announced a proposal to change the governance for AMP. We actually released it as a pull request. And so if you go to the AMP project meta repository, there's now a pull request there that documents what the governance, the next governance for AMP will look like if the proposal goes through. And we also have a blog post with a little bit more information. So you can follow it at these URLs. The Contributor Summit seemed like a perfect place to talk about this proposal, so let's talk about it. But before we talk about the proposal, let's talk a little bit about the history and why the proposal or the governance change was necessary. So we introduced AMP about 3 years ago, and from the beginning, it was an open source project. As Malta mentioned in the keynote this morning, it was very early on, like 2 people, and they were talking about how do we, what governance model do we need, and the tech lead model made a lot of sense. So the tech lead model is this model where basically you have a single person that kind of makes the decisions. Doesn't mean they're doing all the work, but ultimately there's somebody that's in charge that can make the decisions. And in the case of AMP, that is Malta, who this is actually his GitHub profile picture, so he doesn't find this embarrassing, so that's great. I can share it, which is good. This generally has actually worked out really well with AMP. If you see from the earlier talks about AMP statistics and things like that, AMP is doing really well. A lot of people are using AMP. It's got a lot of great features, and it's been expanding a lot. And we feel like actually pretty good about where things are. But as we've gotten further along, we've gotten a lot bigger, right, as part of that, as I said. So here you can see this is the 700 contributors, so you might even see your GitHub name up here. I did pull this a few days ago, so if you just did your first PR yesterday, sorry, I didn't include it. But as we've gotten bigger with the 700 plus contributors, with 10,000 commits, things like that, it became clear that it wasn't really sustainable for a single person to kind of be in charge of where things are going. The other nice thing I think I forgot to mention about a TL is that they can have a very consistent vision, right? Where there's somebody in charge that can say, okay, the whole project is going in this way. But like Malta mentioned in his keynote when he was talking about stories, he said, I don't really know the details about stories. I kind of have an idea about where it is and what is going, but there are other people that know more about that. So along the way, we did try some partial fixes to this. Like we created some sub-teams and things like that, people that would really focus in on different areas, but it really hasn't quite solved the problem. And it wasn't clear how people would have a voice in AMP. So when we set out on the proposal, we had a few goals in mind. The biggest goal and the most important goal was that we wanted more voices involved. This is basically, there's a lot of different constituencies that care about AMP, and we wanted to make sure that they were all included. There's things like publishers, e-commerce, open web advocates, things like that. Importantly, this also includes end users, people that are using AMP that don't even know that they're using AMP, but those are people that we care about making sure that we're serving well too. We also wanted to make it more clear about how people can have a voice. So it's one thing to say, we want more voices, but if we don't document how that can happen, it doesn't matter. And so we'll go a little bit more into a little bit more detail about how that works later. It was important when coming up with a proposal that we didn't want to slow things down in AMP. We feel like we do move fairly quickly. Anytime you introduce new structures, there's going to be some overhead involved. But basically, we wanted the net effect of the changes to be positive. So the clarity that comes with documenting the process, the additional people that are involved and can help out, all of those things would hopefully make it move at least not more slowly, if not more quickly. And then finally, we wanted to learn what's worked. So we wanted to learn from other things like Node.js and JS Foundation, other places. We're not reinventing the wheel here, right? There's a lot of open source projects out there that have thought about different governance things and faced similar issues and similar growing pains that AMP has. All right, so let's talk about the proposal. To reiterate, this is just a proposal, so we're talking about it here. I'll talk in a little bit about how exactly what the next steps are for the proposal to make it actually the reality. So the core of the proposal are these 3 structures, these 3 groups: the Technical Steering Committee, the Advisory Committee, and a series of working groups. The Technical Steering Committee is really like the key committee. This is where the decisions, the technical and product direction are getting set. It should be big enough to have a lot of voices on it, but not so big that you can't get anything done. And so talking to other open source people that have done this or open source projects that have done this, 6 to 12 feels like the right thing. A key point is we don't want more than a third from any company. And so, we'd have a variety of voices there represented. The technical steering committee is advised by the advisory committee, hence the name. They don't necessarily have to do what the advisory committee says, but that the idea is that they would get input from the advisory committee. They can seek that input. The technical steering committee also creates and is informed by the working groups. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the working groups look like in a second. So the advisory committee, as I said, advises the technical steering committee. It provides perspective and advice based on their experience and where they're coming from. It has representatives from key constituencies that I'll show you in the next slide. And again, it's about the same size, 6 to 12 people, maybe a little bit bigger. And again, no more than a third from any one company. So you can see we've already talked to a bunch of companies about being on the advisory committee and individuals across e-commerce platforms, publishers, open web advocates. This is not a final list. In fact, there's a nomination form. So if you think that you're interested in being on the advisory committee or the technical steering committee, you can actually go to this form and fill it out and let us know. Okay, and then there's the working groups. The working groups is really where sort of the day-to-day work gets done. This is, the people that are actually on the ground doing stuff like the UI team or the runtime working group or the stories or documentation and things like that. The technical steering committee provides the working group its mandate. So it says what it's responsible for. Oh, you own this bit of code. Oh, you own this area. But then within that, the working group is meant to run rather autonomously and have a lot of, is it okay? Is the computer still okay? Okay. Clicking a few buttons and see. Okay, great. Thank you. That is truly amazing. Thank you, Miles. All right, so like I said, the working group is where things get done. It is the day-to-day, the day-to-day work is getting done in these working groups. The TSC, like I said, provides the working groups their mandate and they're meant to run autonomously. One key point is that a working group doesn't have a TL. It doesn't have somebody on it that's sort of making the decisions. Instead, the working group has a facilitator that helps go through the decision-making process, but it's not one person saying this is what the working group's gonna do. So the decision-making process actually applies to all of those groups. The key point for the decision-making process is that it's consensus-based. So this isn't a matter of voting. It's not that everything that you do in the group comes to a vote. Basically, you say, if a decision needs to be made, you discuss it. If there's no objection, work proceeds. If there's an objection, you keep discussing until somebody says, let's have a vote, and then you vote, and generally a simple majority. If it is a vote, though, it's kind of seen as a last resort. It's seen as a failure. So if your group is constantly voting on things, you really need to look at what your process is and how the decisions are being made. The working groups, or all the groups actually, are making their decisions in public and asynchronously so that everybody around the world can participate. A couple of other process changes, they're not really governance per se, but they're important parts of the getting things done, is we're introducing a new owner system that allows the technical steering committee basically to give ownership to certain people and say, you have control over what code gets submitted here. And then there's also an approvers working group, and this is for big features, big things that need to get added to AMP. Not small issues, not smaller features, but big things would need approval from 3 approvers. And again, you can see the full details here in the proposal. So let's talk about next steps. As I mentioned earlier, this is the pull request, so definitely go there and check it out. This has all the details. Everything's very spelled out. The nomination form I pointed to earlier. There's actually going to be a design review on October 10th. So we do have a weekly design review, the normal ones that we have for AMP, but we're going to take one of them to talk about the governance. So I encourage you to call into this. We do these via video hangout. And of course, the summit, right? This is a great place to be talking about it. So during the breaks, talk about it with other people, talk about it with me. And then we have a breakout session tomorrow also to talk about this. I didn't remember mentioning the PR again, but okay, here's the PR again. If you want to go look at the PR, one more time, here's the URL. But I think the main thing here is that, as mentioned in the PR, the review period is going through October 25th, so about a month. And then we're hoping to implement the proposal shortly after that. And that's pretty much it. So thank you. The governance proposal, is not very complicated. It's not meant to be this super big heavyweight thing, but we hope that it does really increase the voices that are involved in AMP and help us really get a lot more stuff done, and stuff that's very important for a user-first open web. All right, thank you.